Welcome everyone to Through the Void Gate, a Warcaster podcast for new and experienced players. Deploying in 3.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Through the Void Gate. Thanks for joining us for episode 12. I'm joined today by Spencer.
Howdy.
And we have a special guest today, straight from Privateer Press, Mr. Doug Hamilton.
Hello, and thanks for having me.
So, Doug, for people that don't know, what is your position at Privateer Press?
I have been a staff digital sculptor for a little over 8 years now, and literally I sit around and make monsters and robots and fun stuff for our games.
So, how long have you been doing digital sculpting?
Professionally, really not much longer than what I've been with Privateer. I started doing a little bit of freelance work the year leading up to getting hired with Privateer. And once I got on with Privateer, they were actually the first company to release anything professionally.
That's pretty cool. So, did you do it as a hobby first, or how did it develop?
Well, I had always done miniatures as far as like playing games. I started playing Dungeons and Dragons back in the '80s, and we had miniatures. So that kind of evolved into tabletop games and working conventions. And I went back to school for digital animation, and at the time, I could see that miniature sculpting was looking like it was going to drift into digital, and that was something I wanted to do. So I was able to catch the wave at the right time.
So, you started sculpting first and then went to school.
No, actually, I was learning 3D, doing working on my degree in animation, and happened to pick up ZBrush while I was in school, and it had just kind of started being used in the video game industry, and it just happened to be the right software at the right time. And previous to that, I had never really sculpted anything. I'd tried to sculpt some cloaks on some Spartans for a game, and you could see it was a glob with my fingerprints on it, and it was never going to work out.
I found my passion on accident. I fell into it. It's kind of cool that yours just streamlined towards it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it took a while because when I graduated from high school, I went to college. I was working on cartooning. I wanted to draw comic books, of course, and got sidetracked pretty quick. Just working jobs that that had a good income, and chasing girls, and not paying attention to classes, and so got sidetracked for a long time. And eventually, I got mad about something and went back to school and changed careers, and it worked out.
Nice. And how long have you been working for Privateer Press? And I've heard that there's a cool story how you came to work for them. So would you mind sharing that with us?
Sure. I mean, I don't know what part of it is the cool part, but I'll start from kind of the beginning with them. I was at Gen Con 8.5 years ago, and I'd worked on my portfolio the night before, and this was pre-digital portfolios. Now people would just bring their portfolios on an iPad, and this was where you kind of had to have a book. Well, I couldn't find a place to print it, so I went to Gen Con with just some business cards, and I was standing in line. It was like a 2.5 hour line to get the Retribution Colossal, and Matt Wilson came by a couple different times to talk to the guys that I was with. They were press gangers from New Orleans, and he's talking to us, and the guys were like, "Oh, you should see Doug's art. He's really good." And Matt's like, "Oh, ho, ho, I'm sure he is." And I was like, "Well, I didn't have anything to show him, so I thought I blew my chance," and handed out some cards and got some freelance work from that. And it worked out pretty good because I was able to redo my portfolio in that time, which led up to November of that year, where War Machine Weekend takes place in my hometown of St. Louis. And I had asked a friend that lives here, Tim Simpson, who, he's buddies with DC, who had just gone to Privateer like a year or so earlier to work on rules. And I asked if they would see if they would look at my portfolio at War Machine Weekend, which they said, yeah, we'll give them a few minutes, which, it's kind of that, okay, somebody called in a favor, we'll take a look, but don't expect anything. So it just happened. I had taken off that Thursday and Friday, and I got my portfolio all ready. I'd done a little bit of work on Sedition Wars at that point. So it was kind of my first name company to work for, and they just had a successful Kickstarter, and so I was plugging away on some alien creatures for them. And so that morning, the first person I talked to was Ron Cruzy, who even to this day he's still my boss. He just happened to be at that show and looked through my portfolio. Within about 10 minutes, Ron asked me, he was like, "Well, how do you feel about moving to Seattle?" And I'm like, "Well, this is going really well." And so, yeah, we talked for a little bit, and then he was going outside for a smoke. He's like, "You want to come outside?" I'm like, "Oh, I don't smoke, but yeah, I'm gonna come outside and talk." And so we talked for a little bit longer, and he's like, "Look, I got to go inside. I got to make an appearance, in the game hall." But he goes, "But Ed Burrell, who was creative director, he was also at that show. He's like, Ed's gonna be down from his room in a little bit. We'll talk to him." And so it was probably 20 minutes later. Ed came down, and we sat in the middle of the hotel lobby, and everybody's walking around, and Ed's looking through my portfolio, and he kind of got a big grin on his face, like he was known to do once in a while. And he's like, "Yeah, I like it." And he's like, "Let's give you a freelance job to check out, and see how it goes." And so they had me sculpt the zombie from Zombies Keep Out. And so that went good. And while in between that interview and a second interview, actually, I was teaching at a college, and the college had laid off a bunch of people, myself included. So the timing was there. And Ron had told me the whole time, he was like, you're my guy, just hang in there." And he's like, "Wait till everybody gets back from Thanksgiving." And they did a second interview, and it was kind of a formality. You could tell that it was kind of thrown together. And a day later, they made me an offer, and a month later, I was packing up and moving to Seattle.
Where are you from originally?
I'm from St. Louis, and
Okay.
so a little over 4 years ago, my mom was diagnosed with cancer, and Privateer Sherry and Matt were like, "Well, why don't you go home and take care of your family?" And I was like, "Well, do I lose any pay or benefits or anything like that?" And they're like, "No, you just don't have to come in anymore. Family comes first. So go on. You can be a remote employee." So I was basically the first remote employee that we had.
Oh wow, that's awesome that they were able to let you do that.
Yeah, super cool of them, and it's something I'll never forget, because that let me spend the last 3 months with her. And then almost to the day, a year later, my dad was diagnosed with the same cancer, and I spent his last 5 months with him. So I was able to set up a workstation at their house and spend their last days with each of them. And if I had been in Seattle the whole time, I would, I wouldn't be able to afford to fly back and forth to see them all the time. So it um, definitely something I'm grateful for that they let me do.
It's really cool to hear that stuff about a company too, because you don't like those stories happen, but you never actually hear about them.
Yeah, you
So
really don't, and especially with everybody knows Matt and Sherry. Everybody that's a privateer player or fan of our product, they knew who they are. And there's always different stories, but you don't hear those stories as much, and what they do for people, and the steps that they take for some of their employees. I mean, I kind of knew I was in good shape with them when I had been with the company maybe 3 or 4 months, and I had to leave one of my dogs at home, and he ended up dying. And Sherry sent me a card, a sympathy card for my dog. And I was like, I'm gonna like working for these people. These are good people, and they have been. So
well, the way like Privateer is so connected with the community, it makes it feel more like a small slash family business than like a company of their size. Like you're a decent sized company.
um, don't you'd be surprised. I mean, we're not as big as people think.
How give us an idea of how big you are then?
35 people.
Yeah, I think that just leaves the like definition of small business legally, but that's crazy. Yeah, I would have assumed more.
Yeah, I mean, for the amount of product that we produce and the quality of the product we produce, it's pretty impressive. It's not a lot of people. And so we try to make the most of it, and at the same time still try to stay at a high level. It's always entertaining when people are like, "Well, why doesn't Privateer do what Games Workshop does?" Well, because they have 350 stores in the United States. We have 35 employees. So
Yeah.
there's a there's a difference there. But it's we hang in there. We try to do a good job, and we do stay and we have tight relations with our community. I think we always have, and that's always been one of the great things I think with Privateer is is how connected we are, for better or worse. I mean, there's good and bad about being that close to your community, but I mean, it's very family like. We have our spats, we have our love, we have our cons. It keeps it interesting.
You guys are insanely responsive to the community. Like the amount of times I see someone that works at Privateer comment on whichever Facebook group is crazy. Like Hungerford's on there multiple times a week.
Yeah.
Lauren, the new
Yep.
media person, is
Right, Lauren jumped in.
phenomenal.
Absolutely.
You see Faye on there talking to people. Travis is all over the place. Like,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah,
you guys
we
do a great job.
we try to. I mean, even my boss will say, he's like, you're part of the social media team without actually being part of the social media team. I'm like, well, that's yeah, sometimes you have to jump in and put out a fire, and or somebody's mad and posting something, or they're upset because they got a mispack, and I think it makes a difference if one of us jumps in and says, look, we'll get you taken care of. It happens, so it just, I think it makes a difference when one of us actually are able to do that.
Oh, 100%. It shows that like you guys care.
Sure, and we're gamers too. We don't like a mispack or a miscast or anything like that. I mean, anytime you walk around privateer headquarters, somebody's always got a couple of games on their desks or models from various companies that they're painting. I mean, we're gamer nerds too.
Now, you kind of brushed over it in your last answer, but what other companies have you sculpted for?
Um, let's see. I Over the years I've done, I mean, almost exclusively privateer. I've dabbled on a few Kickstarters here and there. I did a Planet of the Apes Kickstarter where I just did the classic apes because that was something I grew up on. I did like 16 models for a Conan Kickstarter years back. A couple models for Mythic Battles. Usually it's European companies. It seems like. Um, Obviously, a couple models from Crisis Protocol that that were official. Um, let's see, what else was there. Not a lot, because I mean, I try to keep it just with Privateer. I mean, I'm a salary employee for Privateer, so they kind of own me. Um, I mean, really, they don't want me messing around freelancing for people. And yeah, if I ever do anything, it's usually something that doesn't really compete with us. That way, they don't get mad. My name's not out there on somebody else's game that's going head to head with Privateer, so that keeps the peace. And it's still every once in a while I'll do something. I mean, I've done some. Gosh, I did some DC keychains a few years ago, which obviously is not competing with us. It just whatever kind of comes up. I've done some private commission stuff, but I don't do much of that because it's expensive for people, and usually I try to stick with a game company or a bigger company.
I like how you're like, can't have my name out there on other products,
Not
Doug's
really.
Doug's Doug's the Robert Downey Jr. of of
No,
sculpting.
it's not that bad, but I mean, if I went and did stuff for I don't know, for Malifaux, which I would never ever do, but if I did stuff for Malifaux, and my name's all over it, and I'm a staff employee for Privateer, it doesn't look good. So
Yeah, that's fair. So what are some of your favorite types of models to sculpt, and do you have like an all-time favorite model that you've done?
yeah, definitely, it's not a secret. I think my all-time favorite is probably Azrael or Zuriel from Legion of Everblight, and those are kind of the style that I like. I like the organic monsters. I mean, if I had my way, I'd do organic monsters because there's no real set musculature to them, or you can kind of make it up and nobody can really contest it.
So whenever an organic faction comes to Warcaster, you've got the stamp on that one, like
Yeah, hopefully.
dibs.
Yeah, I
You
mean,
got
hopefully, but
dibs.
I mean, I'm having a good time. I've been working on Warcaster this week, and I, today I'm looking at what I'm working on, and I was like, this is like a redemption sculpt. I feel like there were a few things that I did last year that they were just okay, and I feel I'm like this Warcaster stuff, this wave Warcaster stuff it's gonna be super great. I mean, I'm feeling it. It's gonna be good.
Okay, now I'm excited.
Well, I can
Uh,
tell you. I mean, I can tell you what it is. I'll wait to the end to tell you what it is. Then we can talk about that with the last question.
Okay.
Perfect. Do you have a favorite model you've sculpted specifically from the Warcaster line?
The one I'm working on right now is going to be my favorite that I've sculpted, but I would have to say, no, I don't know that I have a favorite yet.
Okay.
Well, because I did 3 sets of infantry and they're all pretty similar. I like them, and then I collaborated on the Scourge and on the what's the solo? Is it is it a Marauder? What's the
Yeah, the
Eternus?
AC.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So those were kind of joint efforts on those two. So that's kind of a just new
Okay.
territory with the sci-fi stuff.
Which Marauder sculpt? Because there's three of them.
Oh, that's a good point. So the first one, the Kickstarter one,
The
it
male
was a
one.
collab. The male one was a collaboration. I started that one, and for whatever reason, my boss Ron and I we just couldn't get on the same page on the proportions. And so after going back and forth on it, he ended up having somebody else finish it up. And that's something that happens once in a while, especially he and I are both remote. So not being able to just sit there next to each other and hammer something out. Sometimes we just can't get on the same page.
Yeah.
That was one of those cases. So someone else finished it off, and then the Gen Con version and the second Kickstarter version were both mine. So
Oh, the second one. I can't wait for that to come in to be in people's hands because the female Marauder looks so good.
thank you. Yeah, she
Yeah.
looks better. I mean, I liked the Gen Con one, but I knew we were gonna get a rash of shit over it because
Mm-hmm. Because yeah, the style.
yeah, and I mean, people should know that's what the style is for that model, and for that event and everything. But I knew it was coming, and I mean, it is what it is. But when I saw that we were doing an alt version of the alt version with a fully armored female, I was like, yes, this is, I definitely want to do this. So Ron asked me, was like, how long is it going to take you to do that? I'm like, not very long.
Nice.
So yeah, I'm
What?
looking forward to having her. I mean, I think I have 5 Marauders already, but what's a couple more?
Yeah. What all have you been responsible for in Warcaster so far?
So the only faction I've worked on is Eternus. I did let's see, the first Kickstarter there were 2 units of infantry, I believe. I don't know all the names because the names change. Um, but the 2 units of infantry, the male and female, I the I can't remember
The
what they're called.
Weavers.
Yes, the Weavers. Thank you. The male and
Okay.
female Weavers, both of them. Then I did part of the work on the Marauder, part of the work on the Scourge. So I think the only thing that I didn't do from the original Kickstarter was the solo. Let's see, there were 2 solos. Let's see, the character solo and the
The
heavy jack.
okay. What about the grafter, the dude
The
with like
grafter, yeah.
all the
I,
arms and stuff?
yeah, I didn't do the grafter. I didn't do the AC solo, and I didn't do the heavy.
Okay.
And then the second Kickstarter, I think the only thing I did on the Kickstarter, another unit of infantry and the solo Marauder, because I think I was working on War Machine stuff during that Kickstarter.
Okay. So you did all three squads and all the Marauder sculpts, the Weaver sculpts, and the Scourge. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, basically, yeah. I mean, or contributed in some way to them. So, yeah, my goal was to have the entire faction mine, but you can't do everything.
I mean, looking at AC though, you could tell that it has that like Doug Hamilton touch sprinkled on top of it.
That's well, when we were first working on them, I was talking to Matt about that faction, and he goes, they're like murderers and in the shadows and pretty scary people. He goes, your kind of people. Like, I don't know what that means, but yes, I agree.
That's
That
funny.
Yeah, no, that's right in line with what I thought. I saw the like artwork for it and I was like, I have a good idea who's sculpting these.
Oh yeah. Well, and it even more so is this next Kickstarter when it comes around. It's totally my stuff.
Mentioned that to the boys before one of our most recent casts when they showed some of the newest artwork. I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah,
The Great
the
Witch. Oh, cannot wait.
Yeah.
Cannot wait.
She's
the
my redemption sculpt.
yeah, I knew it.
I'm not kidding. She's looking so good.
Nice. Yeah.
I I think it was like episode 9 or something. I said to the guys, I was like, there is not a sculpt that we've seen that cries out for Doug Hamilton more than the Great Witch.
Yeah, when I saw the Great Witch and the witch unit, I immediately messaged my boss and I was like, "Those are mine, right?" He was like, "Yeah." Like, okay.
Yeah. And yeah, they showed the render in one of the Warcaster Wednesdays the other day, and it looks so good. So yeah,
Oh, the concept art.
yeah, or whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah, the concept art. Yeah, the render would be of the actual 3D model. So, and I know nobody's seen that yet. Well, I mean,
Except for you.
might be a couple people might have seen some progress shots, but
Yeah. But
Oh,
yeah,
we
that's
need to get in that circle.
yeah,
So,
I could probably work with you on that.
oh, you were mentioning that you work on a lot of War Machine and Hordes, which is obviously like a pretty organic look to it. What has been your biggest challenge when switching gears to sculpt the aesthetic for Warcaster?
Oh, hard surfaces can be tough digitally. For me, I'm good with the hard surfaces. I'm just slow with the hard surfaces because I'm very methodical with how the angles work and how sharp the edges are, and it's not something that it's more mechanical than artsy, if that makes sense. Like if I'm doing a creature, I feel like I'm drawing and I'm sculpting in muscle and plates and horns and teeth and things like that. Whereas when it's something sci-fi where there's a lot more armored plates and things like that, or even for that matter, an actual war machine model like a jack, there's more. It just feels more mechanical. It feels like I'm cutting pieces instead of actually drawing or creating.
That's really
interesting.
cool.
Yeah, it's just a different approach. Working on those hard surfaces. It's just a different approach. It's like I said, it's more mechanical. It's more methodical. I feel less artsy and less free.
Okay. Yeah, and you mentioned earlier that everyone at PP are big gamers too, so we know you don't just work on the models, but you play them as well. So, what are your factions for Warma Hordes and Warcaster?
Oh man, uh, it depends on what I look at last, really. But the last time, uh, the last time I was actually playing regularly, which is only because of COVID, is the only reason I'm not. But I was
Yeah.
playing Mercs, a lot of Fiona the Black, when all the new Merc stuff released last January. So the Legion of Lost Souls, I absolutely love the look of that unit. When I first started playing D&D back in the 80s, I loved the undead stuff, and when I saw that we were putting out a unit of basically of skeleton warriors, I was like, I don't care what they do, what I'm definitely getting them, and whatever faction they play with, that's what I'm doing. And it happened to work out that they run great with Alexia, who I love. She's kind of a cornerstone of the IK, and also let me use Fiona the Black, who was a model that I resculpted that first year I was with Privateer. So it was a chance to actually use her, and I had never used her before. So Mercs are what's on the table now. I really want to throw some Infernals on the table. I've played a handful of games with them. I did all the horrors from the Infernals, and I also did the Howlers, and I have not had a chance to play the Howlers. I do have a list with Fiora 3 with some Howlers because I had worked on Fiora 3 years back, and Retribution has a bunch of new stuff coming out. I shouldn't say a bunch of new stuff, but a handful of new stuff coming out at the end of the month, which that excites me because I've done a lot of retribution over the years.
You sculpted Falseer, right?
Yeah, I did. I did all the new red stuff that's coming out. I did all of that. So I did Falseer, I did the Jack, I did the solo and the unit. So
Nice.
Falseer looks amazing.
stats or sculpt?
Sculpt. I almost bought into Rhett just for the sculpts of her in the unit.
I'm pretty excited about her. So I right after I did Legion last year, which we don't need to go into detail on that. I've talked about it enough. But right after I did Legion last year, I got the Retribution stuff, and kind of Rhett and Legion are the two factions that I would say I'm mostly known for. And so I was happy to get that Rhett stuff. I was really excited about Falseer and how she looked, and she's kind of same. She's the same house as Thyron, and I had done Thyron years back when he came out. So I wanted to have another shot at continuing that line, and I really liked how she looked, and I think the sculpt turned out really good too. So I haven't seen it. I haven't seen a physical copy of it yet, but I'm anxiously awaiting an order from work from HQ with all the new Rhett stuff and Isaiah from Grimkin, and hopefully my Warcaster stuff from this next Kickstarter all at the same time.
Okay, last question about things you've sculpted. You also sculpted the not the Blight Archon, the Defiled Archon?
I did the Death Archon.
The Death one, okay. Okay.
Yes, I did that last fall at about the same time I was doing Isaiah and the Death Archon at the same time. It was like a Halloween theme.
Yeah.
You
Grimkin's
talk
one of my two factions, and Isaiah looks great.
Thanks. I actually, up until people started getting him last week, I had not seen the physical copy. So I had a lot of people send me messages and post pictures of it. I was like, it looks good, and they said he looks really great. He turned out good, so that's always good to hear.
nice. Yeah, and you talking about the Howlers has me. They just released the preview for the IKRPG for Howlers today. I'm
Yeah,
terrified.
I saw that. So
I'm terrified.
I haven't read the entry yet, but we have a group of us that are already planning to play, an IKRPG campaign, and my buddy Tim Simpson is going to run it. And I posted today. I was like, I feel like I need to put together a Merc group that we work for the Infernals, and we're just gonna run around the Iron Kingdoms and collect debts for the Infernals. I'm like, that's gonna be. So I'm like, keep that in mind. That's what I want to do.
Oh man, an IK evil campaign sounds
Yes,
awesome.
right.
That sounds awesome.
A Merc group running for the Infernals. I can't see how that's not going to be a blast.
All right, Josh, you might have to scrap your campaign idea.
I was just thinking that. I was like, well, garbage this idea. Next. Doug, if we end up streaming your idea, I promise I'll give you full credit for this.
Heck yeah.
And it's twofold because Infernals is my other faction and I absolutely love them. So working for them, telling a story about them, okay.
Yeah, I really like how the Infernals turned out. Just that faction as a whole. I mean, the appearance, the evil nature. I mean, our guys just did a great job on it, and I love how the whole thing looks. It's like I said, when you ask about which faction I play, it's almost literally whichever one I look at last. There's times I look in the case and I see all the Satixis that I did a couple of years ago, and I was like, oh, I got to get my girls back on the table, and then I have this little I have a case that I put all the models that I sculpted in. Well, it's overflowing, and I have a box sitting next to it with a bunch of Infernal stuff. And every time I look at that, it's actually a dice tray. I look at all the Infernals, and I'm like, oh, I got to play Infernals. I haven't even fielded the Howlers yet, and I was itching for them to release, and just so much I want to play.
Their models look really cool once they're in hand.
Which ones? The Howlers?
The Howlers?
Yeah, I was really excited about not only sculpting them, but how they turned out. And I mean, they're big, and like when I was working on them, my Ron was like, make them bigger, and I'm like, okay.
That's actually something that's deceiving because when you see the box art, you're like, these guys look real cool. And then you're pulling their pieces out of the box and you're like, what am I about to put together?
Yeah, I can't remember. I think I had to engineer them too. So if they don't go together well, that's probably my fault.
Actually, they're not too bad. There's definitely been worse.
Yeah, those were probably mine too.
But no, they're just their sheer size compared to like all the other infantry in the faction makes them look so crazy.
Yeah, they're bulky and they seem like they're pretty good. So see,
They
now I want
hit
to get my infernals on the table.
they hit very hard.
Yeah, good.
So, if you had a do-over on one model you've sculpted, what would it be?
Man, I'm gonna go with. So, do I get to design the sculpt? Do I get to redesign it?
Yeah, if you could redo the whole thing your way, who would it be?
Blighted Archon.
Ah, I feel like I knew that.
Yeah, it's the least favorite sculpt I've done. And it sucks because I love Legion so much, and I mean, the Legion community was the first community to really embrace me, and it just, I kind of feel like I let them down a little bit.
I mean, I personally don't think it's that bad. It falls in line with a lot of their other aesthetics with like the big teeth, big hands, and whatnot, but that's not
Yeah,
everyone's.
right. I mean, it does. It's just not what I wanted. I wanted something more like a harpy. I wanted something sleek. And then I've thought about this for months now. How can I convince them to let me do an alt sculpt to this? I thought about how cool it would be to have like two sets of leathery wings on it, kind of like some of the creatures in the Avatar movie, where they had two sets of wings. Do something like that, almost like a leather, like a butterfly, but almost like a leathery wing set, and I don't know, just sleeker and a different pose. But
Gotcha.
sometimes you, as a good employee, you do what you're told.
Now on the other end of the spectrum, I heard there was a cool story behind the creation of Zal 2. So for those of us that don't know, could you tell us how that came about?
Well, so Zal is one of my favorite. Zal 2 is one of my favorite characters in the game, and I took I guess it was 4 years ago or so, maybe. I went to European Masters in Brno in the Czech Republic as a artistic guest. And while I was there, I had a great time. It was like the 16 top players from all the different countries that competed in events. It was hosted at Black Oil Gaming Hub. I can't remember the exact title, but Black Oil. It's run by Vladimir, who not only runs a great place, but he's a fantastic cook. They treated me like a king. I also spent like 9 days in Prague being a tourist. So it was a fantastic event. But the people that I really got along great with were a couple of the guys from Greece. The Greeks just kind of embraced me, and they had been asking me for a couple of years, or like, come to Greece, come to Greece, come to our event. So I finally was in a position where I could go to Greek Masters, and so I went there a couple of years ago. Had a great time. The Greek players just they were so kind. They took off days off of work to run myself, my girlfriend, and my kid around. They took us to all the tourist places. They took us to dinner every night. We hung out in these small bars and restaurants and had there's live music and dancing. It was just like a family affair. They were just fantastic. But the cool thing is, not only did I get to go see the Greeks there, but while I was on that trip, I the number one thing on my bucket list has always been to go to Egypt and see the pyramids. And when I was setting up that trip, I was looking at the map, and I'm like, wow, Egypt is right there, right across the Mediterranean. And so I set up a week in Egypt and went down there and got to check off a bunch of things off my bucket list. We stayed in Cairo and saw the pyramids, and we went to Alexandria and toured all the historical sites up there, and we flew down to Luxor to see Karnak and the Valley of the Kings and things like that. And so obviously my love for Egypt is not a secret, and so I took Zal 2 to Greek Masters and did pretty well with Zal 2, and then was kind of influenced by that trip to make a Egyptian version of Zal 2 and a female version. One of the coolest things in Egypt was the temple of Queen Hatshepsut, and she was the first female pharaoh, and so she was a little bit of an influence on that too, and that's how Zal 2 kind of came about. And so I had emailed the HQ about doing that, and they weren't interested. So I just did it myself, and I had it printed up and started painting it, and I posted it on the scoring group. And Jason Souls is like, "Holy shit!" He goes, Have you shown this to Matt?" And I'm like, "No, I sent it to the studio a couple. I went through the proper channels, at the time, and the art director and the studio director at the time, and they're like, 'Yeah, we don't like it.' Like, okay, well, then I'll just make it for myself." And but Souls is like, "Holy shit!" He goes, "Well, I showed it to Matt, and he wants you to get a hold of him." So I messaged Matt, and Matt and I have always gotten along great. We're close to the same age. We have a lot of the same influences. We're both art guys, and Matt's like, "Look, anytime you do something cool, you bypass everyone and just come straight to me because I get things done." I go, "Okay, Matt." So he's like, we're making this. So that's what we did. Matt was like, he bypassed the other two guys. He's like, they just don't have any vision. And that's how Zal 2 came about.
Way to go over your boss's head, Doug.
Well, I went over everybody's head, I guess. I tried to do it, like you're supposed to, and they were like, "Oh, we don't like it." Okay, well, I think it's cool, and so do all the people in the scoring community. And so Matt, what I didn't know is Matt had worked on a sci-fi game. I can't remember what it was called, Grunts maybe, back in the '90s, and he did a sci-fi supplement that was Egyptian themed. So I didn't know that, but I obviously he and I are, again, we have some similar likes, and so when he saw it, he was like, "Yeah, we're making it."
How many people do we have to get to sign a petition to get you to do the next ISA Jack?
Heavy
Oh, I don't,
specifically.
man, those ISA jacks look good.
The
I
I mean the Morning Star is not a community favorite.
Yeah. Well, my suggestion would be to switch factions, and if you're looking for immortality, that's what Eternus Continuum offers.
I'm surrounded by aliens and dirty cultists.
I was a dirty cultist before anybody else, so I'm just carrying on my lineage.
I mean, that's fair. You are the OG dirty cultist with some of your cricks.
Pretty much, yeah. I like my cricks. That was the
How
first
much?
faction I ever picked up.
Yeah, and you sculpted a good chunk of them too, did you not?
As I look back, I have. I've got a lot of tricks under my belt. I'd have to look through the whole list, but a lot of casters over the last 8 years I've worked on. So I don't want to say all of them, but probably close.
So, actually, talking about cricks brings me to one of my favorite things I've heard since I've been involved with the War Machine community. But have you ever heard the saying the Doug Hamilton tax?
Wait, there's a Doug Hamilton tax.
Yeah, I've heard it mentioned a few times. Apparently, it's just like you sculpt you like over sculpt the model, so it ends up costing a couple bucks more than its like same size
Uh,
counterpart.
I've never heard that one before. I mean that
Yeah, I've
it's
heard.
kind of flattering, but I I don't know. I think I'm the opposite of over sculpting. I kind of skip out on some detail. A lot of these guys will put every little dot that they can, and I'm a little bit of a minimalist, I think. But I hadn't heard that one before. I like it.
Yeah, I've heard it a couple times specifically in reference to cricks. So I don't know if
Huh,
cricks are just more expensive or what.
interesting. I'll have to look into that a little bit. I've honestly never heard that one before. That's a good one. I don't think there's any truth to it.
So if the ISA heavy's off the board, all I have to say is the Empyreans could really use a mechanized beholder. Just throwing that out there.
I like that. if they wanted to mix in some organics and some techno stuff, I'm totally on board with that. I'm anxious to see what all of the future Warcaster stuff looks like. I mean, I'm really happy with the look so far for all of it, especially my faction.
Of course, of course.
Well, I mean, Eternus has the coolest look so far. I don't know that they're the most powerful. I haven't played enough to know who the most powerful is, but Marcher Worlds. But Marcher Worlds looks pretty good.
Excuse me, sir. You haven't played against the Empyreans yet, okay?
No, I have not.
Don't come across this table saying marchers are OP until you play Empyreans.
Are they really good?
They are
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah. I was
Marchers
filling out.
is ridiculous.
Yeah, Marcher. So Marchers remind me of Kador as far as they're so straightforward that they're easier to play. I feel like, or at least when I say Kador, I mean like early days of Kador, where it was just um, it was just straightforward. But I haven't played enough games to really say on any of it. I did when I was filling out my comp list for a product that I want sent to me at the end of the month. I put Empyreans ×2 of everything, just so I'll have it all.
Nice. Yeah. I can't wait for my ultimate package to come in the mail here soon.
Yeah, is that everything, or what?
Yeah.
What all comes?
Yeah. That's everything.
I am hopeful that stuff starts shipping soon because I'm ready for some new stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Now, what can you share with us that you're working on right now?
Okay, so let's see. Right now, I just finished off the Infernal Colossal.
Yes.
So that got approved last week. I don't know what the release date on it is, but hopefully I can start showing more than just the claw that I showed this week. I am working. Let's see. I just finished up the Bo Peep mini crate model for Legion, the Shepherd with the baby rake. So I think she's approved. I want to say that's a May release, but I'm not really privy to release dates. And then what I'm actively working on is Warcaster, which will be for the next Kickstarter. But I'm working on the Great Witch, which we talked about a little bit earlier. And waiting in the wings, I have the Witch unit. But this week has all been about the Great Witch, and like I was saying earlier, she's my redemption sculpt. I feel like she's what's going to really get people looking again at what I can bring to the table. But just the style and how complex she is, and the mechanical like train that hangs from the back of her headpiece. That alone is, I mean, it felt like it took days to sculpt, and but it's really I think it's really looking great, and now I can't wait to see what she can do. And so I'm working on the Great Witch. I have the Witch unit coming up after that. And then after that, I'm actually going to be jumping into some Montauk, which I haven't touched Montauk since the opening release with the Lords of Cthulhu. So I've got a unit that I'm doing for a faction. I don't know how if the faction's owned or not, so I won't say it. And then I have a couple of monsters for well, I won't go into great detail. I just got the art for them, but they're pretty awesome looking, and they're right in my wheelhouse. So I'm super excited about it.
So dark and stabby and killy.
Probably.
We've already established that the murdery type is up your alley, so
Yeah, I mean, if you need a cultist to sculpt cultist stuff, I'm the guy.
obviously there's like varying sizes of sculpts, but how much time would you say on average you spend on each sculpt?
Ah, I'm a salary employee, so I really can't answer that question. It It really varies. So the difference between like how I work and how like a freelancer works. So a freelancer usually he gets assigned his sculpt or two or however many sculpts he's working on, and he sends them in, and he may have to do a round of revisions, but ultimately when they don't have to do a whole lot after they sculpt it. For me, being a salary employee, they'll send it back to me 3 or 4 or 5 times. It might be little bitty stuff, or they might change their mind towards the end on how they're doing something, and because I'm salary, they'll have me do it. Or if the engineering team, if they're busy or buried with getting models ready, they'll ask me to help with engineering or to at least backfill stuff so the engineering doesn't have to do as much work. So it's hard to really put a time on it. Um, Usually on average I should probably spend a week and a half on a sculpt. I think last year I did 36 sculpts. So that's not a bad pace, but there's there's a few people out there that are faster, and there's other guys like a freelancer might be getting paid. He's getting paid per job, so they're liable to work 24 hours a day on things, whereas I work 8. Um, but there's also times where Ron might come to me and say, "Hey, we forgot this, or this came up and we need it, as soon as possible," and I do whatever's necessary to get it done in their hands.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious because you look at it and like some sculpts look super intensive, like the Great Witch, like just looking at her art. There's obviously a lot to that. So it just made me curious when she came up.
Yeah, she's actually super complex. There's a lot of layered parts and a lot of little things to her. It's been one of those things with her where I've kind of constructed it piece by piece to make it work. It's almost puzzle like, and also with it being mechanical, like I said, it's takes me a little bit longer because there's a little more precision involved, and it has to look mechanical, whereas organic you can get away with, well, it's a lump in the muscle or something like that. And so she's on top of being complex, and I really think she's going to be a one of those game pieces where even people that aren't playing the game, when they walk by, they want to know what that piece is because it looks cool.
Yeah, for sure.
And so I want
Um,
it to look cool too, and also it's for my faction, so I
gotta gotta give it the love, right?
well, I mean, I gotta flex it, right?
Yeah. So what advice would you give to any amateur sculptors out there wanting to pursue this as a career?
So amateur sculptors, there's a lot of work, and not just in miniatures. I think there's a lot of work for 3D people right now, uh, especially with how popular 3D printing is. It could be games, um, it could be plastic bottles, it could be different kinds of toys. It can be trophies. I did a consultation a couple of weeks ago about designing a trophy, and for a big company, and it can be a lot of different things. My recommendation would be, before you spend a lot of money, make sure that it's something you really want to do and put the time into learning. Um, there's free software out there. ZBrush isn't that expensive overall. I think a full version is like $850. Um, but I think you need to make sure that it's something you want to get into, because it is time consuming and it does take time to learn. And if you're gonna make money doing it, you're gonna have to put a lot of time into it, and it's gonna be every night. And until you get fast, the pay may not seem particularly good, or you're competing against guys that have a lot of experience. But if it's something you like doing, I would say keep doing it. Keep working on your portfolio. Find people that are willing to give you honest critiques. Don't be offended when they do give you an honest critique. Go to shows. Set up meetings with art directors at different game companies. Reach out to anybody you can. if they don't answer you, reach out a second or third time, but just constantly strive to get better at it and learn from people. And one of the, so one of the things that I kind of call it like the locust effect. You know, a swarm of locusts will go in and eat everything and then move on. And that's kind of how I look at the art world, is that you go in and you learn as much as you can, and then you move on to the next person or next source or the next tutorial or the next video. But you keep learning as much as you can and move on, learn, move, and eventually it works out. I mean, you just have to be persistent because it is competitive.
Okay.
I mean, I'm glad. I mean, there's a lot of great artists out there right now. I'm glad that I'm glad I got in when I did before it was overly popular, because man, there's some really talented people out there, and I'm glad I'm not chasing.
We had mentioned to the community that we were having you on the podcast, and I asked them to drop some viewer questions, and we actually ended up getting quite a few.
Yeah, that's great. Let's do them.
Okay. So Nathan Howard says, we have seen the art book and how the faction theme identities were forged into illustrations. Could Doug talk about those concepts and how they were used to create the miniatures?
I could touch on it a little bit, because I'm not actually in on the first part of that. I don't actually see the concepts until they're approved, and so those concepts come to me already in a finished state. So I don't see all the different versions most of the time. Every once in a while I will, but every one that I pick out that I'm like, oh, I like, version B, they always go with something else. So I usually see the final version. I do have a little bit of input on that, but only as it translates to a 3D model from the 2D. So like I'll look at the 2D art and I can make suggestions, or sometimes I'll just make changes that makes sense to translate it from 2D to 3D, because there's just times, especially on a 32 millimeter model, that 7 layers of armor won't translate, or that super tiny vials hanging on a belt won't translate. If there's 4 of them there, maybe we only need 2 of them, or the forearm has 6 straps that go around it, and we probably only need 2 or 3 because it's not going to show up. And so by the time that art gets to me, it's pretty much decided on what they want it to look like, and my job is to make it work for them.
Okay. Next up is Maxime Rosa. He has a couple questions, so we're going to break it down into small chunks.
Sure.
First is right up your alley. If you were charged with designing a new organic faction for Warcaster, what would your inspiration be?
Aliens. I mean, xenomorphs, right? I a straight rip from Aliens. That stuff was such an influence growing up. Even to this day, when I sculpt things, there's a lot of times I'll look at some of the concept art from the Alien series, and reference that. What did I just sculpted something where I was using Alien reference. Oh, the Infernal Colossal. There's some parts on there where I was like, oh, what do the actual aliens look like here? What makes them look creepy? So um, aliens are something along that sign. I just really like the horror aspect. So I would want something a little more horrific.
I mean, that's pretty cool. I know a lot of people are asking for like the Starcraft style.
Oh God, yes, the Zerg.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you. I'm
Oh
not a big
man,
Starcraft guy.
I I was I was born in I am Stork.
That's awesome. I mean, the Zerg aesthetic is amazing.
It really is. I I was a huge StarCraft fan.
If they look anything like Zerg with an alien twist, I guess I have a third faction and I might have to hide it from my wife.
Yeah, I'd be down with that.
If I buy any more factions, I'm in trouble. Um,
Luckily, I get my stuff free.
I mean, that would probably save my bacon a little, but we also live in a small house, so I'm
Yeah,
running out of space
my
to hide models.
my girlfriend already said, she's like, more miniatures. I'm like, they're free.
What faction from War Machine would you like most to give a sci-fi twist to?
Oh, sci-fi, War Machine, or hordes, or just War Machine.
War Machine or Hordes?
Well, I mean, The easy answer is for hordes to just convert Legion into something a little more sci-fi, but um, I could also see a War Machine faction like Khador with a with that gritty sci-fi feel. Like I'm almost embarrassed to say that I just started watching The Expanse because I didn't realize how good it was going to be. But The Expanse on Amazon, it's sci-fi flick and our series, and it's kind of got a almost a real vibe to it. It's a gritty sci-fi, and I think Khador would translate that well. Just kind of the veterans have been at war across the galaxy, so maybe Khador.
Okay. Do you prefer sci-fi or fantasy when it comes to aesthetics of your models?
Fantasy 100%. I grew up on those early days of Dungeons and Dragons. My first real foray into tabletop gaming was Warhammer Fantasy. So Tyranids were my first 40K, and so yeah, I guess fantasy. What I do? Oh, I did Tomb Kings, of course. So yeah, I mean I like sci-fi, but I've kind of gotten more into sci-fi the last few years with Warcaster coming out, and anything Star Wars usually. But my love is always fantasy.
Is there a different mindset you get into when sculpting, like sci-fi versus steampunk versus anything else?
I, it really comes down to the art. How cool is the art? And like the Warcaster art right now is so good that I'm super excited about it. And sometimes I'll if I sculpt the same stuff too long, it you get a little bored. So that's like one of the reasons I'm going to jump into doing some Monpoc stuff is it's kind of a change up from the War Machine and the Warcaster. So it'll give me a break and also let me see what's coming for War Machine and Hordes after that. So if it's something I really want to do, I mean, if you notice my history of sculpts for Privateer, I mostly stick with War Machine and Hordes just because that's what I like. It's close to
Gotcha.
that fantasy.
Yeah, that question came from Mitch Dunning.
All right, and then Doug Hamilton asks the important question. What kind of dog do you have, and why does it love you so much?
Well, that's a great question, and she is curled up right here with me. Um, so I have a standard poodle. My mom was a world-renowned standard poodle breeder, and she had some of the top dogs in the world. And I had one that I got from her, I guess, 4 years before she passed. So it's kind of my keepsake from her. And I always said I wanted one that would love me like her dogs loved her, and I definitely got it. She does not go far away from me, and working from home, she's used to me being here. So she every time I walk in the door, I can walk out to get the mail, and when I come back in, it's like a military reunion.
Nathan wants to know when she's gonna make her appearance in miniature.
Gosh, that's a great question. I talked to I don't know when she's going to make an appearance for us, but my friend Russ Charles, who sculpts for Steamforged, and he did the Dungeons and Doggies Kickstarter. If you've seen that from like a year or two back, and so we've had a few conversations about doing a me doing a standard poodle for one of his Kickstarters, so that I could have her in miniature form. So maybe soon, someday, or maybe I'll just make a mini crate version of her and send it over to Matt and show him how cool she is.
Get her done the right way, eh?
I mean that's how I've done. That's how Little Fenris came about, and to some degree how the Rake puppies came about, and Zal 2, and I think there's one or two others in there where I've literally just made a written suggestion and they blow me off, and so I rough it together in 3D and send it over to Matt, and he's like, "Oh, that's what you meant. Yes, we're doing that."
I'm not gonna lie, I would not have taken you for the poodle person, so I'm glad you explained the story behind that.
Well, it's funny, I get that, but remember, it's a standard poodle. It's not a little one. they're bigger dogs, and they were actually trained hunting dogs for a long time. And my mom even had one that was trained by the police academy in Dallas to be a drug sniffing dog. So she had a big fluffy white poodle that was a trained drug sniffing dog. So people underestimate them a little bit, and when they think poodle, they think the little yappy things, and the standard poodles are they've been hunting dogs for a long time. In fact, all like the big fluffy balls of fur that you see on them in the shows. Well, how that started out was they actually had those fluffy balls of fur on the joints to protect them from the cold and the water when they would go into the water after fall.
Huh.
And it just kind of evolved into the show fluffy poofy version, and but I still take a ton of shit for having a standard poodle.
Plus, they're hypoallergenic, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. She doesn't shed, so yeah, she's smart and dedicated, and I couldn't ask for a better pet. She's my buddy.
Patrick Carolyn says, mad props to Doug for his work on AC and Warcaster in general. And he has quite a few questions, so we'll just break those down one by one for you.
Yeah. Yep.
If you could mini crate any model in the Warcaster line, what would it be?
Warcaster line. Well, we should do some. So the Nemesis kind of looks like a mechanical insect, right? So we could shrink that down into like a almost a swarm. You know, two or three of them on a base or something. I don't know.
That'd be
Those little things like that seem to go over well. Or even make it like a mechanical wasp or something, or take parts from it and put it on like a organic wasp. I don't know. Anytime I've
Matt will approve that one. So.
yeah, probably. So Warcaster's so early though. It's tough to come up with something that would work as a mini crate model.
I really thought you were gonna go with turning the Raker into a poodle.
Well,
It was all set up. Like,
so I already made a raker suggestion when I was talking to them about the baby rakes. I suggested making a mechanical rake. You know, it looks like a Legion rake, but it's mechanical, and just changing the spelling to Raker, Raeker, or whatever. And so they have not gone for that one yet, but yeah. And I've already done I did an alt sculpt of Zuriel that may or may not end up making a con model or something. It's totally a Stargate Egyptian version, because why wouldn't it be with me? But I
I
took
was
the
you were working on that one on Twitch for a couple nights
yeah,
in a row.
yeah, yep, and it's done, and I printed it. It looks great, and I sent pictures over to Matt, and he's like, "Yeah, I definitely want to use it, so don't go giving it away or anything." And but I took that head, that Stargate Anubis head, and I already put it on a raker, and so I just have to print it out. So I have Anubis dogs running around.
I would shovel money out the door for an Egyptian themed Everblight army.
Yeah. Well, and that's funny, because I was like, if we did some themes like that, because I one of the suggestions that I wanted to do was I've already done the Egyptian Zuriel. If I did I could do something like an Azrael and a Krissa, and kind of make a mock starter box, with an Egyptian theme. And so it's still kind of being bounced around. What I think would happen is if I just did it, we would make it. It's just a matter of finding the extra time to do it.
We need to clear your schedule, sir.
Yes, we do. And
What
the problem, my schedule never clears. That's the problem. Like in my free time, I'm messing around making personal superhero sculpts, or I always have friends want me to do something. I have a good friend now. He's like, can you remake this old AT-43 model for us? And there's always something going on that it's never quiet. It's never peaceful for me.
And it's funny that you brought up the turning of the rake into the raker, because this last question is, which is more adorable, a baby rake or a baby raker?
The baby rake, the one that's in the shepherd's arms. The way it doesn't even have eyes, but you can feel the affection of that rake basically looking at the shepherd, and you can feel the love. It's like a Disney movie.
That's super cool, man.
Yeah, I'm happy with how that turned out. It's that's always a test to do something like that with a character holding something like that, and it's to make it feel right, not just a production model. It I'm pretty happy with it, so I'm excited to see how it looks.
Well, that guy has a couple more. So, I mean, what's your favorite Warcaster model that you've sculpted, and your favorite model that someone else has sculpted, and why?
So the one, I mean, my favorite's going to be the Great Witch. I already know that. It's going to be hands down. The favorite someone else sculpted though is the Nemesis. I absolutely love that model. I don't care if it's good or bad in the game. All I know is it looks beautiful, and that's why I play. Why is it my favorite? I don't know. There's just something about the way the that upper body is and the wings sit, and when you get some weapons on it, especially like I have a couple of them, and um, a couple of them I've magnetized, and then I have one that I just put swords on both arms, the blades on both arms, just because it looks really cool.
Yeah, the
So
Nemesis is a gorgeous model. Like
it is. It's
it has like character. Like you can
right.
almost feel it like
Yep.
staring at you, like I'm coming for you with this like predatory like just the way that they were able to do that between the stance and everything else and the poses.
Yeah.
They did a great
It's
job with it.
hands down my favorite sculpt in the entire line of Warcaster. It's a no brainer, and I was pretty I was pretty set on Aternus, um, not just because I was working on it, because sometimes when I work on a faction, I don't want to play it because I spend so much time with it. But I was pretty set on Eternus with the background, and after Souls was telling me a few things about it that was coming for it, and I was pretty set on that. And then when I saw the Nemesis, I was absolutely sold on it. I there was a It was a no brainer for me. The Nemesis is just one of the best models I think we've produced.
Yeah, it's definitely gorgeous.
It's so good.
Yeah. And then, so like to wrap it up, what's been your most challenging moment sculpting for Warcaster?
So Warcaster was a little challenging. Those the first Kickstarter that we did last year. First of all, we were on a tight timeline, and like I mentioned with the Marauder, I had kind of the same issue with the Marauder and the Scourge that so I have a version of the Scourge that I did that looks more like a War Machine Warjack, and we just couldn't get on the same page, Ron and I, on how sleek it should have been. Like he wanted something smaller, and I was sculpting it like a Warjack. So that was one of those where someone else had to finish it off because we couldn't reach common ground.
Yeah, I would love to see your initial stuff because I know like the Scourge is, and people have commented on this, is it's very skinny, like
Yeah,
compared to especially compared to the rest of the Warjacks.
yeah.
Like, yeah.
So I'll try to
So
if I can think of it, because I have a render of my version of it. Mine looks like a War Machine Jack. It's a little bit wider and a little bit bulkier. So remind me, and I'll send you over a screenshot of that so you can see what it looks like.
yeah, for sure.
At the end of the day, this version of the Scourge turned out good, but it's just it's a lot smaller than I expected, a lot skinnier than I expected.
Yeah, for sure.
It does make
But
that
it
claw
was
look mighty intimidating, though.
yes, it does. Yeah, but that one and the Marauder, it was there's only been I don't even know if it might have been the first two times where I've ever had a model that I started that I didn't finish, where we just couldn't come to terms on how it should look. I had it set in my mind how it should be sculpted, and my boss had it set in his mind, and we just couldn't get on the same page. And it's super unusual because I've done hundreds of sculpts at this point, and Ron and I, from the day we met, we've always been pretty similar mindsets and how we see things. And I mean, hell, he and I every Monday he and I have a conversation on what models that we've looked at, what different game systems we looked at, and we're kind of a support group on keeping ourselves from buying things that we're not going to play or um, just things like that. We talk about gaming stuff, not just work stuff. Because we're both a little bit older, so we like historicals too, and so we're always looking at something and trying to justify buying something. And
I need
what
to
we
give
do,
myself that kind of support group.
well, yeah, and also we try to paint our stuff too, and we'll talk each other off the edge as far as buying new stuff that we're not going to use, or like this week's conversation was I was looking at the what is it Tinker Turf, Tinker House, Tinker Turf.
Oh,
Tinker
Tinker
Turf,
Turf.
yeah.
So I was looking at that terrain. I was looking at their Kickstarter and then some of their boxes that they already have released, and I was like, wow, this would look good on my my Warcaster or my Star Wars table. And
Yeah.
I have a bunch of the Gale Force 9 like Egyptian style ruins that I play on my table at home, and I'm like, this industrial stuff would be perfect to add to my desert table. And he's
Mhm.
like, well, that would be a good addition to your table. I'm like, wait a second, you're giving me the approval for something? I'm like, what's going on here? He goes, well, I've been looking at this Kickstarter for this World War II train set, for scenario play and that. So maybe for our February purchase, I should back that Kickstarter, and you should get the Tinker Turf terrain, and those would be our only purchases. So
That's
we kind
funny.
of agreed that that would work.
I do highly suggest Tinker Turf. That's what we have for our personal games for Warcaster.
Yeah, I think it looks good. In fact, I was because my local game store is Miniature Market. So I know they have a couple of different sets of it at their store there, and I was waiting to pick it up. I don't want to I don't want to sound bad, but I'm waiting to see if we get any kind of discount with Tinker Turf before I buy it from Miniature Market.
Yeah. Well, the Tinker Turf also does like 25% discounts off a lot, so you can usually get it about the same cost as Miniature Market. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm okay going directly to them, and
Yeah.
or if they want to trade, if they have somebody there that plays our game and they want product, I'm willing to make some deals.
Hmm. Yeah. And then apparently, PP has a relationship with those guys, so
Yes,
maybe you can,
exactly. So
yeah, maybe you can get a discount.
yeah, that's I mean I'm not asking for anything extra. Their
Yeah.
product is super affordable and it looks great, so I don't have
Yeah.
a problem
It
paying
is.
for it. So
So
It's
also,
super simple to put together.
that's good. I don't want to put a lot of time into my terrain. I mean, I love a board with terrain on it. I'm not a big fan of 2D game boards. I like the immersion of
mhm.
having buildings and things. One of my loves for like World War II type games is the terrain that goes with them, and so I like having the 3D terrain.
Apparently, the majority of Warcaster's internal playtesting was done with Tinker Turf.
Yeah, I think
So
everything that I've seen has a lot of their stuff. So
mm,
I would not be surprised.
yeah.
So that closes out our Facebook questions. Thank you to everyone that took time to ask Doug questions. With that, I think we're going to start closing it out. Spencer, do you have any final thoughts?
No, just wanted to thank Doug for joining us today.
Yeah. Doug, do you have any final thoughts?
As usual, I appreciate you guys having me on. I appreciate the community and how much they've supported us, especially after seeing the IKRPG wrapping up this evening. I don't know where it's going to finish up at, but the support from the community has been more than I could have possibly have imagined. So hats off to everyone for that, and I just can't say enough about our players and what they do for us, and guys like yourselves that are doing podcasts to help support the game. You guys are part of the team, so I can never say enough about it.
We really appreciate you coming on, and we are super stoked for the IKRPG as well. All three members of the cast have pledged at some level,
Awesome.
and I've already started writing a story, but now I'm stealing your story. So,
Well, I'll be happy to serve as a consultant for that story.
I'm gonna take you up on that.
Definitely.
All right, guys. Thank you everybody for listening, and we'll talk to you guys next time.
Thank you for listening. This podcast is brought to you by Essex War Games. Now, if y'all enjoyed the content, don't forget to subscribe. Now, for more content, you can check out the Through the Void Gate blog, or join us on the Essex War Games Facebook, Discord, and YouTube. Stay safe and roll super strikes.